Hey, Ron here. And today I'd like to talk about... Actually, we're going to hold off on that. I'm going to keep that a little bit close to the chest. You'll see why in a minute. So, something that I do in the real world, something I do outside the internet and on the internet sometimes, as much as I can, is curtailing fascist activism. Anti-fascist activism, most people would describe it as. Nothing violent, not yet. I've been held at gunpoint on one occasion from across the street, but usually stopping people from engaging or entertaining fascists is just as simple as saying, oh hey, these people are fascists, they're not good people. Most rational people don't like people who aren't good people. That's why Milo Yiannopoulos doesn't have a job anymore. I was explaining this to a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, like family. Known him since I was like 10. I was explaining this to him about anti-fascism and why fascism is bad and a little bit why it's on the resurgence. And one of his friends comes into the conversation and starts talking about how anti-fascism is bad and freedom of speech stuff. I have a lot of experience dealing with these people, both online and in the real world, so just generally in my experience, the best way to let someone show their true colors is to let them talk too much. So I let this person more or less talk too much. Asked him to clarify things in as flattering a way as he could, or in as flattering a way as I could, and it was interesting. He started talking about this period in German history called the post-Weimar Republic period. That probably tipped off some of you. Just follow along. So he was talking about how anti-fascist action was founded in this post-Weimar period, and how even then it wasn't necessary, not in the way that proponents of anti-fascism would say it is. He strenuously, more than once, compared the post-Weimar period of Germany to the period that we are in the United States. He explained that Germany had been a series of feuding states, and how they had recently pulled together to become a global powerhouse. How they'd been disenfranchised, by the rest of the world, and were currently trying to claw their way out of that. More importantly, he started explaining how clawing their way out of the mess that the rest of the world had gotten them into necessitated that they expunged the country of certain, not always dissidents, but mostly dissidents, and quite a number of people from foreign countries that were openly hostile to the country of Germany. He said something interesting. He said that some people had described the places that these people who were being removed from the country were being put as concentration camps, but they were the same kinds of, his words, not mine, they were the same kind of bleeding heart liberals who were describing the border camps that we have now as concentration camps. I talked to him a bit more about it, or coaxed a little bit more out of him. He went on to say that there was a war coming here in the United States, and we know that at least in part because a war came from the post-Weimar Republic era of Germany. And that while there were atrocities performed during this time period, they were equal to, if not less than, atrocities that were happening across the world concurrently. That there was a historical precedent for the things that happened. And when he said that, that's when I told him that I knew what the fuck he was talking about. For those of you who maybe aren't aware, the post-Weimar Republic era of Germany was Nazi Germany. This friend of my friend was literally spouting Nazi apologetica. And this person had told me that, but you were convinced I was right, because I took a neutral stance. Neutral. It's an interesting word. I just lied to you, by the way. That conversation never happened. That's an example of the thing. This is about neutrality. I want to talk about neutrality and how sometimes being neutral on something is bad. Maybe even worse than taking a side. Than taking the wrong side. Because there are sometimes right and wrong sides. Nazi Germany is one example. Nazi Germany was fucked. Nazi Germany is responsible for some of the worst atrocities that mankind has ever seen. Now don't get me wrong. Functionally, everything that I said, again, this conversation that I just told you about never happened. Everything that I said is true from a certain perspective. You can compare Nazi Germany to what the US is doing right now. There's actually a very informative video about just that, by 3 Arrows. I'll link that in the underbar. The similarities are uncanny. There's also even a precedent for the Holocaust, in that, we here in the US wiped out, or very nearly wiped out, in some places absolutely wiped out, the entire indigenous population of our country. I'm sitting on stolen land. But that is not... There is a human cost. When people talk about the atrocities of Nazi Germany, or the Khmer Rouge, or fucking Andrew Jackson and his genocide campaign, they're not... Historical precedent be damned. There is a human cost to those things, and that human cost is far too high. And if you cannot acknowledge that, then you are not acting in good faith. You are not a person whose word can be trusted. But that's an obvious example, right? Nobody who's going to say, oh, hey, Nazi Germany was actually, we should look at Nazi Germany more objectively. I think we'll find that there's a president. You're not going to listen to those people. They're full of shit, and you know that. So, another example. Climate change. There's a video that I have burned into my memory. I must have watched it like 30 times in a row. It's one of the first videos on the internet that I saw about climate change. At the moment, I'll see if I can find it and link it in the underbar, but at the moment I can't remember the name of it or who made it. I know that it was the first part in a series, and it was setting up the conversation for climate change, in as much as it was demonstrating how climate change was having an active effect on the world that we live in. These are very old videos. They're from 2009 at the very latest. But this person, this science teacher, ostensibly, I remember him picking up and eating a candle at one point during the video. He explained that he tried to have these conversations online before, and whenever he would do that, there would always be people who came in and talked about the conversation, and they were interested in talking about the conversation. and talking about how there was an interesting point to be had on both sides. And how eventually this person realized that this wasn't a conversation that we could have for fun. This was something we had to make serious goals, because climate change was killing people right now. And climate change is killing people right now. This is a point that I've made in the past, but if you don't believe in climate change, then you need to shut your fucking mouth and let the other people do the hard work of fixing it. If you are neutral on the topic of climate change, then you are a bad actor and you need to be kicked out of the discourse. Because neutrality is not an option. One more story. I swear this one is true. So I was talking to Caleb of Faraday Speaks last week sometime. We were talking about various YouTube people. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail because that's a private conversation. But I will tell you that I did express some dissatisfaction with certain YouTubers. One or two specific people. Specifically because of their adherence to a quote-unquote neutrality on certain topics. And it's not that in those cases it's bad. Switch. It's not that neutrality in and of itself is bad. It is that, well, that's the thing. I told Caleb that as soon as I figured out how to explain to him in better terms what my problem was, I would explain it to him. And Caleb, if you're watching, I don't expect you to be doing that. I understand that you're very busy, but if you are, I've figured out how to do that. The problem is that sometimes neutrality is not an option, not a rational option, not a good option. It is an option of defeat. And if you have someone who acknowledges that there's a problem, but dismisses the solution to that problem, every solution to the problem that they acknowledge as being too expensive, or too utopian, or that the political zeitgeist isn't moving in the right direction for it. If they understand that there's a problem, but dismiss every solution to that problem, then maybe they don't believe there's a solution to the problem. And maybe discourse with them is not good. To be clear, I'm not talking about Caleb talking to anyone. I'm not going to chastise anyone for talking to anyone on the left, or even necessarily on the right. It's not a big deal. People take certain aspects of social media much too seriously, I think. Which is another topic for another day. But yeah, that's what this is about. It's about neutrality. I think that's all I have to say about that, at least for now. If you have anything to add, leave it in the comments. I do read all of the comments. I delete shitty comments, of course. I very heavily moderate my channel. A very gentle reminder, I have Ko-Fi, or Coffee, however it's pronounced, if you feel that this has been something worth watching. If you feel like it's something that has enlightened you or entertained you, do not feel obligated to give me money. I don't do these things for money. I don't make these videos for financial gain. I make these videos because I feel it is important to be part of the discourse, as someone who is on the ground, so to speak. I also have a Curious Cat. If you want to send me questions anonymously, I try to check that every day. I've been getting a lot of anonymous harassment via Curious Cat, incidentally, so maybe if you want to balance that out by asking me random questions like, what's your favorite food on pizza? Or I don't know. What's the worst Dragon Quest game? I have very strong opinions about Dragon Quest. Do not ask me about... No, I don't. So... I'm hoping that on Halloween, I can release the video about Akira and anarchism that I've been working on for a really long time. Yeah, that's a little bit ahead of schedule even, so I've still got to record it, but that's not going to be a problem. The editing is going to be the problem. Yeah. So, until we get there, take care of yourselves, alright?